My name is Jose Martinez Salvador, though in my town they've always called me Don Cheek. Now, old at 78 years of age, with my bones worn down by the weight of time, I spend my days sitting in the plaza of Hichapan Hidalgo, letting my memory drag me towards stories that others preferred to forget. While many lose themselves in talk about politics or complaints about the high cost of living, I carry memories that I never share, for not everyone would be prepared to hear them. It's not about simple superstitions or town legends, but about open wounds on the soul that have marked me since childhood. In my town, there was always talk of witches, not caricatures with pointy hats or flying broomsticks, but real women capable of transforming into the darkness, of making forbidden pacts, and of feeding on the vital liquid of the town's little ones. La Pena was a nearby hill, a place pointed out as the spot where those creatures gathered during the full moon. No one in their right mind dared to wander around there, because it was said that whoever approached would return deranged, if they managed to return at all. I was just a kid when I understood that those stories hid a terrible truth. I was around 11 years old, and that night the full moon shone in the sky like a fresh cheese. That afternoon I had helped my father lock the goats in the corral, because there was a rumor that something was stealing animals in the town. Although some talked of coyotes lurking around, deep down we all knew something worse lurked in the darkness. Night fell wrapped in a strange silence, so heavy that not even the crickets dared to sing. And then I heard it, a sharp, twisted whistling that didn't sound human. I immediately remembered the warnings of my grandmother Soledad, but still, instead of running away, curiosity pushed me to hide behind the corral, and that's when I saw her. A white, naked figure under the moonlight, with matted hair and twisted, almost animal-like movements. She was smearing a black, viscous substance on her arms and legs that gave off a stench of rotten herbs and dead flesh. The scene was as repulsive as it was hypnotic, and I was unable to look away. Suddenly, that woman's body began to contort. Her veins swelled like black cobwebs under her skin, while her bones cracked with a dry, brittle sound, accompanying spasms impossible for a human being. The woman ceased to be one before my incredulous eyes, and from her back sprouted enormous, membranous wings, very similar to those of a bat. That which launched herself into the sky with a monstrous leap, beating her wings with a noise like wet leather. Fear finally took hold of me, and I ran home with all my might, without stopping. I hid under the blanket, trembling with fear, and for obvious reasons, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyelids, the image came straight back to my mind, the body deforming and rising towards the moon. The next morning, my father scolded me for having left the corral open. I kept silent, unable to explain what I had seen, although I soon understood that keeping quiet wouldn't change anything. That same dawn, the screams of Dona Socorro, who was the mother of a girl named Lucia, woke up the whole town. Going to her house, we found the little girl lying on her mat, pale as lime, with strange marks on her arms and legs. They didn't look like bites or blows from anything known. They were round marks with a black dot in the center, as if something had held her with a force not of this world. However, the most terrifying thing was her wide, bulging eyes, fixed on something invisible to those of us with her. The mother, consumed by screams of despair, swore she had seen the widow, a sinister figure known in the town's legends, like a specter that seeks to take away the souls of the town's little ones. We all kept silent and resigned, because invoking that name was no small matter. Lucia remained unconscious for some time until she finally regained consciousness and recounted what happened. She told that at dawn she felt an unbearable weight on her chest, as if a stone were crushing her without mercy. Opening her eyes, she made out a skeletal woman with skin clinging to bone and with yellow eyes that shone like a cat's. That apparition murmured incomprehensible words in a low tone, spoken in a harsh language laden with sounds that were not human. The figure leaned over her and blew an icy air onto her face that pierced her to the very core of her being. Instantly, her body became completely paralyzed, and a deep sleep dragged her down as if she were sinking underwater. It was that breath that nearly snatched away her soul. The story sowed deep terror among those of us listening with our mouths open. From that moment on, no one ever again doubted the warnings of the elders. What I had witnessed by the corral and what happened to Lucia were part of the same horror. The witch of La Pena had descended to the town and was no longer satisfied with stable animals, now she was fixing her attention on the children. That memory was etched into my memory forever. Over the years, I understood that life in this corner of Hidalgo guards secrets that many prefer to deny. The young people insist on calling them tales or superstitions of the elderly, but I lived it firsthand. Although time continues its march, every time the wind whistles in a certain way through the trees, a chill runs down my spine and takes me back to that night when the darkness showed its true face. The uproar caused by the attack on Lucia was shaking all of Hitchapan when the town's midwife arrived. She was a woman respected by the entire community, not only for bringing children into the world but for her knowledge of things that few understand. She mastered ancient prayers and remedies of herbs and secrets to face what does not belong to this world. She arrived hurriedly with a crucifix in her right hand and a small bottle of holy water in her left. While murmuring prayers and sprinkling the girl, she shared a testimony that chilled the blood of everyone there. That very night, returning from attending a birth, she had seen something on the roof of Lucia's house. At first, she thought it was a fanciful shadow created by the moon, but that shape moved, crawling like a spider, only larger than a man. Before she could react, she heard sharp laughter and murmurs that seemed to mock her. Gripped by fear, she clung to her rosary and ran to take refuge in her house. No one doubted her word, for the old folks knew well what it was about. Don Cleto, who was already over 80, stated without hesitation that it was the work of the witch from the hill, the same one who since time immemorial stole the breath of children to preserve her youth. Some neighbors murmured that little Lucia had been lucky, for those creatures weren't always satisfied with just breath. Sometimes they took the children away, leaving broken homes and an impossible silence to erase. Lucia took weeks to recover from that event, when she finally managed to get out of bed. She was no longer the happy girl who ran through the plaza. She remained pale and fragile, as if a little life escaped her each day. The doctors from Pachuca talked about anemia and prescribed vitamins, but those of us present that night knew that medicine could do little against something that didn't belong to this world. The girl grew over time, though she was never the same again. Over the years, she became a reserved, quiet woman, her gaze almost always fixed on the ground. Crossing the plaza, she would cast furtive glances towards La Pena, as if fearing that from there something invisible was watching her. Sometimes she would bring her hand to her chest in anguish, as if she still remembered the weight of the witch during that dawn. Years later, when she was an adult, she confessed to me in tears that she still dreamed of the bony woman. She told that some nights she would wake up with the feeling of yellow eyes fixed on her from some corner of the room, or with women's laughter circling her house. I could only squeeze her hand, unable to soothe such a deep fear, for there are things that never end, not even with the passage of time. That feeling of guilt accompanied me all my life, for I always thought that perhaps it was all a consequence of my silence. That night, when as a child I observed the witch in her transformation, and perhaps she saw me and marked me forever. It could be that she had followed me and instead of taking me, she decided to unleash her fury on Lucia. That thought pursues me even today, when I walk closer to the grave than to life. The town also changed after that event. Although some stubborn ones continued to say it was all just village tales, those of us who knew the truth began to live more cautiously. I began to notice details that previously went unnoticed in daily life. On certain nights, when the wind descended from La Pena, strange laughter could be heard coming from the darkness. It wasn't human laughter or the noise of drunks in the cantina, but broken laughter full of hatred, as if someone were trying to imitate a human voice without quite succeeding. On one occasion, while accompanying my father to look for a lost goat, we heard that laughter deep in the wilderness. He squeezed my shoulder tightly and indicated that I should not look in that direction. I obeyed my father's instruction, though curiosity burned inside me, and the next morning we found the goat dead. It wasn't devoured or torn apart as happens when a coyote attacks, it was dry, as if all the blood had been drained from it without leaving a single drop. The most unsettling thing was the absence of wounds on the animal's body. And soon the scene began to repeat itself. A neighbor lost two goats that appeared the same way, rigid, with eyes open and tongue purple. My compadre Rosalio swore he saw a shadow one night hunched over his sheep in the stable. He ran for his shotgun to defend himself, but upon returning, he only found one of the animals agonizing, its skin cold and damp, and that ended up sowing fear throughout the town. My grandmother Soledad, who knew of those creatures that lurk in the darkness, called me one day while we were shelling the season's corn. She took my hand with her wrinkled fingers and gave me a warning that was tattooed on my memory. She made me understand that I should never look into the eyes of those creatures of the night, for they could become engraved in the mind and pursue me forever. She also taught me that I should never answer if something spoke my name in the darkness, because once they know what to call you, they already have you marked. The terror reached its peak with the case of Dona Alejandra, a woman who lived alone near the hill. One morning she was found lying on the ground, her face twisted and her eyes completely bulging. She could barely move her body and repeated in a thin voice that the woman from the hill had touched her window and had whispered unforgettable words to her. That day, many understood that this was not a tale of village elders, it was real and closer than ever. Poor Alejandra never fully recovered. A month after that attack, she died without receiving the farewell from the town priest, and her name remained engraved in the community as a lament that still hangs in the air. Her tragedy became a warning for the community, for it was living proof that what we faced was not a fantasy. After her death, the entire town began taking precautions at all hours. Families resorted to defenses inherited from generation to generation. Some hung open scissors on the main door, convinced that this could cut the evil before it entered. Others placed brooms upside down by the threshold to confuse the witch. There were those who filled buckets with water at the entrances of their homes, because it was believed those creatures had to count every drop before being able to cross. Rue was also planted around the houses, forming a green wall against the dark presences of the dawn. I myself adopted my own safety measures. I never went out without a handful of salt in my left pocket, nor without the image of San Benito that Father Rutilio gave me. My grandmother always repeated that better safe than sorry, and I took those words as a rule of life. Perhaps thanks to the precautions I began to use in my daily life, or maybe due to simple divine mercy, I never saw a witch face to face again. But that doesn't mean they're gone. I am convinced they are still here, lurking and waiting for the right moment to show themselves again. On some quiet nights, the air takes on a smell of wet earth, and dogs howl with a sadness that freezes the blood. In those moments, one knows that something is lurking near the town, even if one cannot see it. Then I clutch the wooden crucifix hanging around my neck, and my body reacts on its own, remembering what the mind would like to bury. My wife, rest her soul, used to laugh at my obsessions with the witch. She saw me as a total superstitious man, clinging to beliefs that no longer had a place in modern times. But she wasn't there that night. She didn't hear the screeches on La Pena, nor see the terror fixed in Lucia's eyes. She didn't feel that cold that seeps into your bones until it leaves your body trembling, and for that I never blamed her. One only believes in these things when one has to face them firsthand. My grandchildren, raised among screens and technology, also laugh when I tell them this frightening story. For them it's just a simple legend. I look at them very seriously and ask them to ask the old folks in town about Alejandra Collin. She died little by little, trapped in fear, and never set foot in the plaza again. That wasn't a story, that really happened. Then they fall silent and lower their gaze to change the subject. Today, when I sit in front of my house as evening falls, I raise my gaze towards La Pena. From afar it looks tranquil, bathed in the sunset light, but I know what it hides. Sometimes I wonder how many more have lived through experiences similar to mine and decided to remain silent for fear of being thought mad. Because the worst thing is not seeing something supernatural. The truly terrible thing is that no one believes you. Time has erased people's memory, and in the town they hardly talk about creatures of the night anymore. The elders who knew the secrets have gone one by one, and the new generations prefer to think it was all invented to scare the children of the region. Even so, there are still those who, at the crack of dawn, secure windows and nail crosses on the main door, and trace circles of salt around the bed. They don't do it out of habit. They do it because deep down they know there are truths that never change. Now in the twilight of my life, I have it clear, this world guards mysteries that should not be tempted. It's not always about seeking logical explanations. Sometimes the wisest thing is to respect what is unknown, as my grandmother Soledad used to say. He who believes in nothing is capable of believing in everything when it's already too late. And there is nothing more terrible than discovering that in total darkness, with heart pounding and soul trembling. This is what I had to tell, and perhaps some won't believe me, but what I lived through marked my existence forever, and even if I try to forget it, every howl in the night reminds me. Witches truly exist, and for that reason, as long as I live, I will carry salt in my pocket, a cross on my chest, and prayers on my lips, because no one knows when their shadow will cross with ours again.